Hello everybody and welcome to Missy's Imaginings. Today we are going to work on a project that was first requested from someone in our community, and then I thought it'd be really fun to work that request into our projects for the 12 Gifts of Christmas. So yeah, we'll go ahead and start into the design and pattern drafting for the Gingerbread Girl Christmas gift. So this will be drafting the pattern for the leotard and an option to make the leotard with sleeves as well as the tights, and then some instructions if you want to add the tutu. So here we go. Today we're going to look at making a pattern for this little bodysuit. I had a request, and I do have this bodysuit for a 3rd scale female. It's just a little like tank style leotard or swimsuit. We're going to go ahead and make a pattern from this garment that I already have. I know this fits just kind of a basic 1/3 scale doll, lots of different sizes, and the reason is because it's made of a stretch fabric. It does have a wide stretch and a little bit of an up and down stretch, so kind of a two-way stretch. It's probably a lycra spandex fabric. This came with a doll that I purchased many years ago, and so I thought, well, we'll use this to make the 1/3 scale pattern, and then we can scale it down to make a smaller size for the 1/4 pattern. And like I say, this fits. I've had it on several different kinds of dolls. I've had it on an Angel Studio. I've had it on the Resin Soul, and I've had it on what's the other one? A Miro doll. And yeah, so some different body types. It was fine on all of them. I didn't have any trouble fitting it on them just because it is stretchy. It looks like this has been made, and it has like a 1/8 seam allowance, just turn over hem on all the edges, and a little over 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. But what we're going to do is a quarter scale, a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then after you sew, you can trim away anything that you don't want as far as the seam allowance. So we're just going to start by going around the basic shape of this little leotard. So we'll come over to this side of the fabric, and I'm going to do the back of the garment, which is this part back here, and then we'll just kind of experiment here as we go, and then we'll kind of take into account kind of how I go about making a pattern. So first I'm going to kind of place my item here, and I want to just roughly get an idea where I can place the center. So I'm going to do an up and down line. Let's get some lead in my pencil. And we'll just go like this and make a line, and hopefully that will show on the camera. Then I'm going to line this up here. Okay. And I want to make sure the seam has been folded out on the bottom, so I get that exact, and it's pretty easy to center the bottom here. Then kind of lay it as flat as possible. Okay, we're going to come down here, go across, and I'm kind of at a slant, so my pieces might want to slide down a bit. And because I have used this, it may be a little bit stretched, but that's okay. So we're going to come around the leg here and up. I'm trying to make sure I've got the the center here, and it might be a little off, but I think that's going to be fine. I'm pulling the seam out so that I have the actual seam. And this might be a multiple step process, so. Oh, and I can feel my table moving. There we go. Okay. And then I'm looking at the strap. Comes up here. And again, I want to bring it all the way to the seam on the strap, which is here. And then it comes down. Okay, so there's my side. Now what I want to do is I'm going to take the back and I'm going to pull the center of the back out as if it was laying on its side. Lay this out. So I've got my straps lined up and the back. Okay, and we're going to take the center of the back onto that center line. And another way you can kind of make sure you've got it lined up correctly is match up the side seams under the arms. There we go. Okay, and then we're going to pull this down so it's folding in the center. So that we can bring that down to where it matches. So there's the center back. And there are a lot of curves, so it is it is kind of a challenge. Okay, so here's my center back along the center line. And what we're going for is where to place this back part. So we're just going to follow that curve. It's a little bit rough right now, and there we go. So there is the back without a seam allowance. And hopefully this will be dark enough to see. Okay, so there's one side of the back. Now, to make our job easier, I don't try to duplicate that with a drawing. I am going to fold on our line like this. And we're gonna, and remember this has no seam allowance. So, and I'm gonna cut a little bit outside the line. Just to make sure I have enough fabric. Because it's always easier to make something smaller, but not easier to make it larger once you've already cut your fabric. So I'm going to come up here. All right, and then around the back. All right, so here we have our back piece that looks like this. So there is the back piece, and it is without seam allowance. So now if I lay it on here, I want to see if there's enough room all the way around, and it looks like there is. So once again, I'm going to fold this so I have a center line. Because on my first attempt, my line was too close to the outside edge. I didn't have a room to make that seam allowance. So now we will do a center line. Okay, so now it's going to be a little bit easier because we don't have the fabric that's kind of wobbly. Okay, so now I'm going to simply go around the edge of the pattern piece here that we've cut. Okay, we'll do the other side. Kind of have a little bit of a lump where that other piece of paper is, but I think that'll be okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, and down around the leg. Okay, so now we're going to add a seam allowance of 1/4 inch. I'm just going around all the edges, putting on that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then the back scoop here. Okay. Now once again I'm going to fold because it's a lot easier than trying to duplicate what I just did with my pencil. So I'm going to use my scissors to cut around. This time I have the seam allowance. And up the strap. Then the back scoop. And there we go. Okay, so there is the back of our leotard with the seam allowance. So that's ready to go. Okay, now we have to look at making the front. And I'm not going to keep this. That was just drafting steps. So now we're going to look at doing the front. To make the front of the garment, now I kind of have an idea of what the size will need to be with the seam allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and place where I know I have enough seam allowance at the top and the bottom and mark my line for the center. So here we go with the center front line. Now this time it is a little bit different because I can't initially trace around the leg line, but I know that the side seams have to match. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with placing the garment here, and I'm just going to go to the very bottom of the paper with that seam allowance, and I'm going to mark where the bottom of the garment is and then where the side seam has to match. So I'm going to do the side seam here because I know the side seam has to be the same. There we go. And this does have a seam allowance, so you know what? I think I will grab that other piece that I kind of crinkled. And we'll go ahead and put it in place just so that we can trace the side seam of the actual garment. Just so we've got it for reference. Because that's got to match the garment that we're actually tracing. So we'll do that here. Okay, so there's the bottom of the garment and then the side seam, and then we could match the top, though that might change because the front might have a little bit to go higher. So now what we're going to do is we're again line up the center of our garment, and here I'm going to actually clip, just because I don't have the ability to really go around the legs like I did when I was doing the back. So I am going to clip these just to help hold them in place a little bit until I get to that part. So I'm clipping at the side seams as I fold on the center front, and just kind of clip these into place so that they can lay nicer. Then with that lined up, we're going to put the, let's see here, maybe I'll go kind of on the side more. We're going to line up the seam of the front and then the front of the garment with that center line, so that now I can trace along the front edge of the leg. So here we go. So I'm just doing a little bit at a time, and I've got the seam lined up there. And I'm trying to keep the center fold on that center line and just going around the front edge of that leg. There we go. Then again, I'm gonna, cause see how floppy it is? So it is a little bit of a job. So now we're going to come up higher where that leg is. Okay, and then I'm going to move this clip, come to this part. Again, just following that leg line. Then I'm still holding this in place down at the bottom, so I can line up my center, come up to the top so that I know where the edge of the neckline is supposed to be. Okay, and then we know where our previous piece came up to as far as width. So we're going to lay that down, and this might be shaped a little bit different again because it's the front coming up rather than the back. We're just going to gently unfold those up. It looks like here's where the front is. So it looks like the front seam is shorter than the back seam. Okay, and then it's going to come down to here. I might give it just a little, like, I don't know, a couple millimeters extra length, just in case. And here is the front edge, and it did line up almost perfect, so we're just going to kind of smooth that out, and here's where we want that to come so that our side seams will match. Then we're going to add our seam allowance. Seam allowance here. And then I'm going to take a look at the front. And so from the edge of like the neckline here, the seam is only here. So that looks about right. It could be a little bit higher. But it is noticeably, the seam comes up, and it does come a little bit forward on that shoulder seam. So it's going to be fine here. So we're going to come here, then we'll add our seam allowance. We're going from this line right there, so we want to add 1/4 inch. Alright, and here's the front of our garment. So once again, we're going to fold on the center line. And my board is moving again. Alright. Okay. And we'll cut along the seam allowance. There's the leg opening. Then we'll come here up the side, which we know is going to match the back because we know we have to be able to sew those side seams together. Okay, and up to the top, and then around the neckline, for the front of the neck. Okay, get these out of the way. Alright, so here we have the front. So then if we lay those on top of one another, we know that's going to fit the side seams. Here's the difference in our leg front opening and back opening. There is a difference in the front under the arm and this. Then these will match. Here's the front neckline. Then here is, oh, sorry about that. Here's the back neckline. So just again, we'll take a look in case I had it off camera there. Okay, so the front leg side seams match. Then the arms are slightly different from the front and the back. Front neckline and then the back. There we go. So I thought it would be fun to also make a long sleeve for this pattern because some leotards do have a long sleeve. So I'm going to grab my Huarong basic set because I know that's primarily going to have the longest arm. So to have the longest arm that I have, then I'll use that, and then it can always be shortened if you have a doll with a shorter arm. So now what I want to compare, if I'm going to make a sleeve, is first I need to determine what the actual sleeve opening will measure. So what I'm going to do is get my handy dandy little measuring tape, and I'm going to measure the actual sewn line of the front. And I love these little measuring tapes because they're flexible, and that way you can actually line it up along the line. So we're going to start with 0, and I'm measuring with centimeters because I can have a more accurate measurement that way than trying to divide up inches. It's just a better system, I believe, for sewing with better measurements. So here, and I do have my camera in the way, so I'm looking at 5.5 centimeters for this edge. And then on the back, we're going to measure as well. And we have 5.6. So it's only different by a millimeter, which I think the difference is this is straighter and this is more curved, but the length is essentially the same, only a millimeter difference. So that makes it easy for our cause. I always like to add a little bit more length on the shoulder seam, and then if there's any pucker, I just put it at the very top, just because it makes it a nice way to have fullness over the shoulder. So now we need a different piece of paper, because clearly this one is not big enough. So we'll grab a new sheet of paper. And I'm going to fold it in half, lengthways. Okay. And let's see, because this is longer, let's see if I can adjust my camera to come a little bit farther out. And there we go. Hopefully that's better for you to better see, and we'll move our light. Okay, so hopefully that will show up well. Okay. Now we know that because this is a leotard, and because these go kind of, they're not like right at the edge of the shoulder, that I do want a little bit deeper of a cap on my shoulder. And by that I mean, well, where's our scratch paper? Okay, so if you have a very wide, like puffy shoulder, like here's a horizontal line, for example, you can come up over the shoulder and come back down. But by a deep shoulder, where I want to have more coverage over the shoulder itself, it means I want to come up a little bit higher than normal, so that I have more fabric to actually go up and over the shoulder. This one is pretty high, but I may go ahead and make it a little bit higher. So first we're gonna try not to press my board. We're gonna mark the center so I can line it up well. Okay. Then we're gonna, first I want to measure and see what this distance actually is in comparison to what I need. So we're gonna start at 0, because on my basic set I didn't write the measurement, so we're gonna take a look and see what we've got here. Okay, and this is a lot bigger than what I need. So this is like 6.8, and I don't need it to be that big. Let's see here, to fit mine, so that, yeah, that's, well, actually 6.8. So this right now is 6.8, so it's almost 7. So I don't need it to be that big. So I know that I can make this a little bit more narrow. So one way, because I want to be able to see this line when I'm drawing on here and not the seam allowance, I am going to get my light table. Alright, hopefully this will show up. I've kind of changed my lighting, so I hope I don't have any weird reflections going on here, because I just want you to be able to see. This light table I bought on Amazon, and it is very thin and it lays perfectly on my drawing board. So yeah, it will look a little backlit on the images and my hand, but at least this way you can actually see what I see as I'm tracing this piece. So I love having a light table. It is so worth my time and money to invest in this, because it makes it so much easier when doing patterns. So here I have my sleeve. As you can see, the sleeve through this sheet of paper, which is really nice to be able to do. So I'm going to narrow the line here because I don't need it to be that wide, because I am going to be using a very stretchy fabric for a leotard. So I am going to, though, make it a little bit larger than what the actual arm opening is, because like I say, I can have some pucker up at the top of the shoulder. So we're going to go, this given is 6.8, and I only needed on each side about 5.7 max, or 5.6 max. So I am going to go with more like 5.8 on each side, which will give me a little bit extra to go over the shoulder. And I am going to bring that drop down just a little bit. So first I want to make sure I have enough length. So we're going to measure to where it is 5.8. It's going to be about here. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of height to that edge on the top of the shoulder, just a little bit, and I'm going to come down here and narrow it, and then around the sleeve opening I'm going to narrow just a little bit because I will be using a stretchy fabric. So we're going to come down and make this a little more narrow. This pattern for the basic set is what I use to draft, and often I don't make it smaller than this because I'm using fabrics that don't have the stretch. But because this is a leotard and it will have significant stretch, I'm going to go ahead and reduce the width of that sleeve so it will stretch around the arm. So here is going to be my sleeve, and then I'll add the seam allowance, which will be in just a bit from the basic pattern, because I am making it a little bit smaller. I'm keeping kind of the length of the sleeve though. Oh, moving my board again. So we're going to come down. Now we'll do the seam allowance on the top. Come down to where it needs to meet. Alright, now we'll remove the original, and then we can kind of see our new sleeve. So now we'll fold it in half again. Love symmetry, love little shortcuts like this that make it easier to draft patterns. I remember all my students would say, why do we need geometry? Why do we need it? I said, well, you'll probably use it and not even realize it, because this principle of symmetry is very geometric. Very geometry friendly. Alright, now we're going to go up a little bit higher. So now we have a sleeve option for our leotard. So here we have the sleeve, the front and the back. So this is all 3rd scale size. then I thought, well, you know, if we're going this far to do the leotard with a sleeve, we might as well do a tight pattern for tights or leggings. So we're gonna get these out of the way, and then I'll be right back with some of our basic pieces so we can work on the leggings. Okay, a little bit of a warning, dolly nudity coming into place. So here we go. So we're bringing a doll. This is the Hue or Wrong, and I know I want to do some tights, and I'm hoping she won't knock everything out off my table here. And so to draft the tights, I know that I probably want just the front to not have a seam. So I am going to mark where the fold is on my normal tight pattern, which is down the front of the leg. So I'm just going to mark, and I've wrapped the doll in saran wrap and then completely encased the saran wrap or kitchen wrap in tape, cellophane tape. So here is my fold. So when you look at a normal pattern for tights, the straight line is the fold that goes down the front of the leg, and then this wraps around for a seam in the back of the leg. But I want to make tights, so I am evaluating how I can make tights. So I'm going to flip her over, and I know that I do have a seam in the back of the leg, so I'm going to do the seam line with a black Sharpie, which I know on my tights I have a seam line down the back of the leg. So I know this is a seam. So I'm going to go all the way down to the heel. Let's see if I can adjust her. And down the center of the foot, down to the toes. Okay, so there's the seam for that. So now what I want to contemplate is my seam for the back. So I'm drawing my line for my seam because I know this is a fold. So I know I want a center seam in the front up to the waist as well as the back, but I do have a line where this fabric is going to fold over and be sewn up the back in here, and then I'll put those two pieces together. So this is where my cut lines will be for making the tights. So now I'm going to cut the saran wrap and tape, or kitchen wrap and tape, off the doll on the black lines. So we'll do that and then we'll be right back. So now I have cut on the black line, so I will remove the wrapping from the doll. Oh, I missed some of my wrappings. There we go. And we'll remove that. And let's see if we can pull it off here. Oh, we're getting caught on our lines. It is difficult to do this with one hand. And it looks like I may have missed, looks like I may have missed a little spot. So let's come in here. There we go. Okay. And here is the piece from the doll that we will now use to make our pattern piece for the tights. And because it is made with, it's going to be made with a real stretchy material, we may put a few little, like a little slit to kind of flatten it out a little bit. But this is essentially now, we'll start here, going to be the shape that we want in order to make a pair of tights. and in order to do it with just minimal amount of seams. So let's cut away some of this saran wrap. I like to clean out the excess layers that I don't really need, because I often put several layers around the doll just to ensure that I don't actually mark on my doll. So I want her to be covered really well, but then I peel those away from the inside of my pattern, because basically we're saving only the cellophane that is actually attached to the tape. So a lot of this we can clean out because we don't really need it, and it just kind of makes it pull and makes it have a lot of extra, like squeezes it together a little bit, so we can flatten it out a little bit better once we cut away some of this kitchen wrap that we don't actually need in here. There we go, and kind of it flattens out a little bit better that way. Alright, so let's get some of this excess done. Oh, we'll cut all the way to the front of the toe. There we go, so we can bring that out. There, I'll just snip the toe here. Okay, yeah. Oh, here's some more we can clean out. Another layer. Oh goodness, a whole big layer. Okay, we'll clean that out. As you can see, it is time consuming. And if you say, but I end up with a mess of kitchen wrap. Oh, I do too. So you're doing it right still. Alright, so here is our piece of cellophane wrap that was wrapped around the doll to give us the piece for our tights. And so I'm going to keep the red line straight up and down as much as possible, and then flatten these other pieces out as much as I can around it. And because they're curvy, I may add a little bit more length down by the toe. And then just kind of flatten it out. And like I say, since this is of a stretchy fabric, then we'll be okay. So here we go. And then when we're going to wrap it to sew it, I know that these two pieces need to be sewn together. So I am going to put an asterisk here and here. There we go. Because I know I'm going to sew from the toe up to that corner and then go around the corner and sew that together as well, which will form one whole leg. And then we sew the crotch seam together and then put elastic in the waist. And then that gives us our tights for our ballerina. So we will go ahead and now transfer this to flat paper. Okay, so now I have drawn a line to represent the center front, and because both sides of the legs I know are going to be the same, then I'm only going to kind of worry about right now one side of the leg. I'm not going to worry about trying to get both sides the same, because for me that'd probably be impossible. So I'm going to line up. I am going to give more distance on the toe and curve it around. Then I'm going to curve around the feet here. And then go into the ankle. Okay, and I'm trying to keep the line straight here. Hopefully my arm won't be totally in your way. And go around. And here, since I usually say, now remember when you're drafting a pattern, you don't want to go with exactly what the doll was wrapped because you'll only get a tight bodysuit. But in this case, that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. We want some tights. So now I'm going to go along the line of the thigh. And I generally make it a little bit away from the edge of this just because I know I have to account for all that curvature that's pulled. So then we're going to have this back line. Okay, and now we come to kind of the saddle fit here. And again, I want to line up my red line because that kind of pulled a little bit. So I'll make a little bit of a correction here. And I usually will just draw a little arrow to the line that I actually want to keep. There. Okay, and then I'm going to go up for the center front here and come straight down. Okay, now the leg part I know I can do on the fold and not worry about it, so I'm going to lay it over, come over to where the leg will reach the top, and I'm only going to worry about the part that will come up onto the actual hip area of the doll. So I'm going to come up here. Again, I'm going to give it a little bit more width to allow for the fact that that's really curved. And then I'm going to connect those. I'll probably give a little bit more width because I know I'm going to have elastic in the waist anyway. There we go. Now what I can do is I can turn my light table back on and fold the paper on the line. Okay, now I'm going to trace the side of the leg again that we already drew. The heel and down to the foot. All right, and here is now our tights piece. So this is the front, this is the back. I'm running out of lead. All right, so here is what our tight piece will look like. So now we just have to add the seam allowance. So we'll go on one side. I might define the foot a little bit more. There we go. The seam allowance here. Then up the leg. Straighten that out a bit. We know that that and that has to match. Seam allowance here. Seam allowance on the front. We'll come around. All right, then we can fold. And I am using tissue paper so I can see through the papers. So we'll trace our seam allowance on this side. Then on up this leg. Okay, then, because I know I'm going to want a casing along the top edge, I know that this is going to be the very top edge of my tights, and I want that to be like a fold line, so I'm going to need enough room for elastic and a seam allowance. So I'm going to add about 3/4 inches to the top edge so that I have room for an elastic casing. So you have to add that as well. Alright, so here we have our tight pattern, and let's see, let's go ahead and draw this on with a marker just so it's more clear. And we have back. There we go. And hopefully my hand is not in your way. There's the top edge that will allow for an elastic casing. Then we have the center front. We'll come down with a saddle fit that will connect in the back under the bum here. Then we have the legs. Down to the ankle. This front line is just our center front fold line. And then the foot. And there we have it. So there is the pattern piece, and we would cut two, of course, one for each leg. So there is our tight pattern along with our leotard, and then a sleeve option for our leotard. So when I get these ready, of course, because this is such a large piece for 3rd scale, it will be cut so that I can fit it onto 8.5 by 11 paper. So like, here's my 8.5 by 11 paper. So one piece will be the top half, and then there will be a division place for then the bottom half, and then those two would be assembled to get that piece. The leotard pieces look like they might both fit on one sheet of paper, and then of course the sleeve would be on the other piece. So here is our finished pattern. We have the front and back of the leotard. We have the sleeve for the leotard. We have the tights that can be put together to make a pair of tights. And for the tutu, we have a piece of rectangle tissue. This is 30 centimeters by 75. To sew, you'd simply fold it in half, cut 3 layers of tulle, fold in half, sew along the fold to create a casing, thread elastic through it to fit your doll's waist, and there you have the tutu. So that is drafting a leotard pattern and what the pattern looks like when it's finished, which will be posted very soon on the website for free. And when I'm able to reduce it to a 1/4 size, that will also be posted. So until next time, bye!